Every MMA fighter will eventually have to retire regardless of how great they are. They might even be the ones who introduce you to the sport. We've seen the saddest and most heartbreaking ones, including a few who were forced due to injury. But today we're going to highlight some of the best retirements in MMA. Those of the athletes who left on top or simply had the best send-off. Number 10. Marco Ruas. At the time, Marco Ruas was a superb practitioner of hitting, grappling, and submissions. His skills served as the model for an all-around MMA fighter. The king of the streets, Ruas, who made his debut in the UFC in September 1995, won the UFC 7 tournament after taking down 3 opponents, 2 by submission, in a single night, including the massive 6'8" Paul Verhoeven's via TKO. A group of combatants, including the mixed martial artist Ruas, are credited with popularizing MMA. He retired at the age of 50 in 2007. Number 9. Zach Cummings and Ed Herman. Zach Cummings and Ed Herman mutually agreed to fight each other and to make it their final match of their respective careers. For Zach, the fight was even more special because it took place in his adopted hometown of Kansas City, Missouri, and at the UFC. It ended with the absolutely iconic image of Zach and Ed laying down their gloves next to each other in the octagon and bowing and embracing in respect for both of their careers. It was an awesome moment for Zach. He didn't go out a champion, but what a special moment in the sport. Things got even more emotional when his daughter ran into the cage for a hug. Number 8. Frank Shamrock. The UFC Middleweight Championship, subsequently known as the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, was initially held by Frank Shamrock, whose record is 23-10-2. In 1997, he faced Olympic gold medalist and unbeaten fighter Kevin Jackson in his UFC debut. In spite of being a heavy underdog, Frank Shamrock armbarred Kevin Jackson in the first round's last 16 seconds to win his UFC debut. He continued to defend his championship in the UFC 4 more times, with the final time being against Tito Ortiz, whom Shamrock subsequently referred to as his hardest opponent. He was hailed as the best fighter in the history of the organization by many, including the then owner of the UFC, Bob Meyrowitz. Frank Shamrock declared his retirement in 1999 while holding the middleweight championship of the UFC and having a perfect record of 5-0 in the organization. Later, he went back to mixed martial arts, competing for organizations like K1, WEC, Strikeforce, and Elite XC. Number 7. Baz Rutten. Baz Rutten has won the King of Pancrase heavyweight title 3 times and is the former UFC heavyweight champion. Rutten made his UFC debut in 1999 against Tsuyoshi Kosaka, fresh off a 19-match winning streak and excited about his Pancrase career. Baz Rutten was the victim of Kosaka's brutal ground and pound, yet he still managed to pull off a stunning knockout in the last seconds of the fight. Following his victory over Tsuyoshi Kosaka, Rutten will face Kevin Randleman for the championship at UFC 20. After a fiercely contested bloodbath, Baz Rutten defeated Randleman by a unanimous vote. He became the UFC heavyweight champion as a result of the disputed decision. Later, Baz Rutten gave up his middleweight belt to switch weight classes and become the first UFC fighter to hold titles in 2 weight classes. However, because of the injuries sustained during preparation, that ended up being Rutten's final bout. On the doctor's advice, he was compelled to give up MMA. Rutten returned to MMA in 2006 for one last fight, going against Ruben Villarreal, the former UFC heavyweight champion, won via TKO. Kicks. Number 6. Henry Cejudo. Former UFC flyweight and bantamweight champion, Henry Cejudo, he is just the 4th fighter in the MMA league to simultaneously hold championship belts in 2 divisions. His victory in wrestling at the 2008 Summer Olympics make him the youngest American to ever win an Olympic gold medal. In the bantamweight class, he made his UFC debut in 2014 against Dustin Kimura. He won the UFC Flyweight Championship in 2018 after defeating Demetrius Johnson at UFC 227. After defending it against TJ Dillashaw 5 months later, Henry Cejudo gave up the championship in order to return to the bantamweight class and win the gold. Henry Cejudo won the bantamweight championship by defeating Marlon Moraes at UFC 238 a year later. However, after successfully defending his bantamweight championship against Dominic Cruz at UFC 248, Triple C suddenly declared his retirement. As it was perceived as an effort to haggle his wages with UFC President Dana White, the statement was welcomed with considerable skepticism. Number 5. Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre, whose record was 26 wins and 2 losses, has won the UFC middleweight and welterweight titles 3 times each. He's one of the finest fighters in MMA history and is highly recognized. In terms of championship fight victories, he ranks 2nd in the UFC history with 13, and he has successfully defended his title 9 times. In the 3rd longest title reign in the history of the UFC, Georges St-Pierre's tenure lasted 2,200 237 days. In 2004, he faced off against Karo Parisyan in his UFC debut. In his MMA career, he has only lost twice, against Matt Hughes and Matt Serra. Later in his career, he avenged these defeats. In 2013, GSP defeated Johnny Hendricks in a contentious decision to win his 10th defense of the welterweight championship. St-Pierre won the fight by unanimous decision despite being well outclassed for most of the fight, an outcome that UFC president Dana White harshly criticized. St-Pierre announced at the UFC 167 post-fight press conference that he was taking a break from competing for a little bit. After giving up his championship a month later, he retired as the current welterweight champion. Number 4. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Up next is the former UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov, whose record was 29-0. He made his professional debut in 2008 and his UFC debut in 2012 and defeated Al Iaquinta to win the lightweight belt in 2018. At UFC 229, he defeated Conor McGregor, one of the most well-known fighters on the globe, to become a superstar. In 3 championship defenses, Khabib Nurmagomedov defeated Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. Khabib declared his retirement after winning over Gaethje at UFC 254, citing the death of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, his father and coach. The Eagle refused to make a comeback despite efforts from UFC president Dana White to get him to. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undisputed and unbeaten lightweight champion and the top UFC pound-for-pound fighter, announced his retirement in March 2021. Number 3. Pat Miletich. When it came to his professional MMA career, Pat Miletich, at the age of 27, was a late bloomer. However, in UFC Brazil, the Croatian sensation would go on to win the UFC 16 lightweight tournament as well as the UFC welterweight championship. The punishment Miletich meted out occasionally came back to him in equal measure, since he was one of those soldiers who wore their hearts on their sleeves. The American, who was born in Croatia, is recognized for teaching people like Tim Sylvia, Matt Hughes, and Jens Pulver, to mention just a few. He retired in 2008 at the age of 40. Number 2. Royce Gracie. Royce Gracie, the younger brother of Rickson Gracie, is recognized as the most influential mixed martial artist in the discipline's history. Gracie participated in UFC 1 in 1993 when he took first place. He also triumphed in the subsequent UFC 2 competition. The 11 submissions the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master earned during his time with the UFC remain a record. Similar to Rickson, Gracie competed professionally less than 20 times, yet he'll always be known for his mastery of some very amazing submission techniques. Dana White denied Gracie's plea to make a comeback at UFC 134, which took place in his home country of Brazil. Since June of 2007, after his retirement, Gracie has only participated once in a professional competition, which was in 2016 in a trilogy fight against Ken Shamrock at Bellator 149, which he won by TKO. Gracie will always be regarded as one of the pioneers of contemporary mixed martial arts, as well as the reason why the sport attracted a large international following. He retired in 2007 at the age of 41, and then again after his comeback fight in 2016, age 50. Number 1. Don Frye. After eliminating 3 opponents in the UFC 8 competition in under a minute and in a single evening, Don Frye won over the crowd. At the UFC's Ultimate 96 Championship, the Predator won his second tournament by submitting Abbott with a rear naked choke. Frye entered the octagon for the final time on that occasion. Frye moved to Japan because Pride called him there. At Pride 21, he gave one of his best performances, defeating Yoshihiro Takayama in a 6-minute punching match via technical knockout. He retired in 2011 at the age of 46. In the world of MMA, legends are made both inside and outside the octagon. We've taken a nostalgic journey through the 10 best retirements in MMA history, celebrating the fighters who left an indelible mark on the sport. If you enjoyed this retrospective, hit that like button, subscribe for more MMA content, and stay tuned for the latest updates in the world of mixed martial arts.